Okay, ready for you, and hopefully the tape holds. Right, so yesterday we had some pretty in-depth conversations about the spotted eagle owl, but particularly in comparison between its eyesight with an owl and a cat. So I've actually gone and drawn them out for you. I had such a fun day today preparing this for you because I am a biologist. Diagrams are my A game, and this made me exceptionally happy. So I wanted to show you how it differs because they are both exceptionally good at seeing in the dark. Much better than us, in fact, and they estimate that an owl's eyesight can be anywhere from 10 times to 100 times better than us as humans. And the reason for that is some very strangely structured eyes. So the bottom one, this is the cat eye. The top is the owl's eye, and this is also why I told you to remember that an owl's pupils are not moving from side to side, they're pretty solid. So let's talk about the owl's eye first. As you can tell, it's a very strange structure, almost a bit like a bell. If you were to turn a bell on its side, it looks a bit like a bell. It's actually known as a tubular eye or a tube shape. Some people call it a cone-shaped eye. It really just depends on who you ask. And this is the owl eye. Now, I want to go into a little bit of a lesson about it because it is so fascinating. The most unique thing, other than the shape, is bone. So I was talking about the fact that they can't move their eyes. It's because they're actually they've got what's called a scleral bone, which sits here at the top, here at the bottom, but what you can't see is this is a cross section, so it actually makes a circle, and it fully encases the eye in what's known as the sclerotic ring. So there's actually bone in an owl's eye structure. It holds it completely still, which means the owl can't move its eye, instead it has to move its head. But what it allows for is the fact that the eye can grow bigger, it can grow to a much more different shape to occupy a majority of the owl's skull. So most of the space in an owl's head is actually occupied by the back part of the eye. What it also means is that the lens can be quite a bit bigger because of that extra space, and that lens allows an owl to pretty much super focus. So it can see very, very fine details on anything. There's a little insect there. Some other little mite on my page. So an owl can pretty much super focus, but the biggest difference, because we were talking about them seeing in general and particularly seeing at night, the biggest difference is not the cornea or the pupil, which is the gap that is controlled by the iris, which are these muscles here. It's actually the fact that the retina is such a different shape and is incredibly large. So in a normal eye, like a cat eye or even a human eye, the eye would be rounded. It cuts out this entire surface area at the top and the bottom where the image forms. Your retina is this whole layer where your image is formed, and it's formed by things called rods and cones. It's nourished by the pectin, which is a little network of blood vessels that keeps everything alive, but it also controls the pH in this liquid part of your eye that the image passes through. And this giant retina at the back, this is why we see such an impressive eye shine from an owl. It's also why they have such good vision. This is all collected and passed down the optic nerve, and that goes to the brain to tell the owl what it's seeing. But most importantly with owls in comparison to cats, since that's the conversation we had yesterday, is that the owls will have a lot of rods in this big surface area. It means they can have a lot more rods than most other animals, and rods are responsible for light sensitivity. Rods and cones are the structures at the back of the eye. They collect all the details. Whoops, sorry, I'm dropping there. Rods will collect all of the light sensitive things, so basically seeing shadows and light and focusing that in black and white, versus the cones, which are responsible for color. They will have a few cones, but not very many. Because they're nocturnal, they don't need to see color because you can't see color at night. So instead they have a hyper-focused image in the dark. Mindy, I'm really happy that you're enjoying the diagrams. So am I. I had so much fun drawing these. I really did. So this is a very big difference here. A really high concentration of rods so that they can see all of the light they possibly can at night. Very few cones because they don't really need to see color. So they see mostly in monochrome, with the exception of a few basic colors in very light shades. Let's move over to the cat's eye. I'm actually going to move it up and rest it there. Hopefully it's not going to blow away. There we go. Well, it's blowing away. I'll hold it there. So that's a cat's eye. You can see it is much more basic. Still the same basic structure with the lens and the iris controlling the diameter of the pupil to let in more or less light. But the biggest difference is that right at the back, the retina is the back surface of the eye. Moving again, sorry, this wind. The back surface of the eye here is where the retina is, but you can see that surface area is a lot smaller than it would be for an owl. It's also got an even mix of rods and cones, so it can see both light sensitivity and that side of life, so basically collecting color at night, light at night, and it's got a lot of cones because cats will be active during the day and the night, so they need to see in color. But the point where it's all collected and sent out is a lot smaller. You can see it's a lot smaller there. So it's a decent eye shine still because we're seeing that part of the eye, but we're definitely not seeing what we would see on something like an owl. So it's a very, very, very different structure. And so as much as they can both see really well at night, I was saying yesterday, an owl can see a lot better than a cat. And it's for exactly that reason. This structure at the back, the whole back of the shape of the eye is totally different. So it's not going to be nearly as good. Ren, I'm really happy that you're enjoying it. It's always nice to get into the biology of things. It's always nice to look at something very specific, hyper-focused, and diagrams really help. So you can see why I wanted to draw them yesterday, because looking at something like the internal structures of an eye, how do I adequately describe that in words? It's much easier if I get to draw pictures, but it's also a lot more fun because I love this. This is biology. This is what I studied. Diagrams are my A game. I love it. Now, I do have another one to show you, but I'm going to get that one ready and then we'll go into talking about all of the feather structures. Little body going. Very high metabolism in a small bird. But we're back to the conversation of diagrams, and unfortunately for you, this one is not going to be nearly as technical of a diagram as the other one. This is to start the conversation on how owls can be so quiet, because we were talking about that yesterday, and I promised I would draw you some pictures to show you how it works, because again, it is easier. I've also upped my game, let me tell you. I've added tape on 3 sides so that the wind can't blow my wings away. How funny is that? Ironic, isn't it? Okay, so this is a little bit of a different one, and you're probably wondering what this is. Initially, Gerrit thought they were beaks or bills, and I can't blame him for thinking that because they do look a bit interesting. But these are wing shapes of different birds. Now, to start the conversation on why owls might be able to fly so silently, one of the first things is just overall shape and design of an owl. So if you think of every raptor, majority of them have quite a distinct looking wing, such as the eagle. It's a very distinct shape. This looks like a batelier wing. That's what I was basing it on, and there you can see these would be the primary and secondary feathers. This is where they come down, and that's kind of where the leading edge of the wing is. So the front of the wing, the bird would be flying that way, going forwards. Okay, so I've drawn in some basic feathers to show you that's the shape that I've gone off of when I've drawn all of these wing shapes, and this is the typical shape of an eagle. Now, eagles have a very specific strategy in comparison to something like an owl. They rely on speed, particularly if you're looking at things like kites, goshawks. All of those raptors rely on speed, so the wing shape is very aerodynamic, but that's not all. Their feathers are very tightly packed and quite hard. If you run your finger over the feather of an eagle, it makes a noise as though you're almost running your finger over some really hard tape or something with a lot of rigidity to it. And that's exactly what those feathers are designed to do, because they need to be able to withstand high speeds. So the feathers are hard, tightly packed together, and the wing shape is kind of like a blade. It's a very distinct shape. Now, I've done a few other birds for you as well to show you the different shapes of the wing. I haven't drawn the feathers in on all of them. I just showed you the basic one. Swallow, also very high speeds to catch insects. A complete blade shape to the wing, very sharp on the end, very hard feathers, tightly packed filaments so that it's very, very solid. There's not very much fluffiness. It's more glossy. It's more tight, if that makes sense. It's a hard feather. Let's have a look at the one below that. Going to the crow, a kind of a mix between an eagle and something large like a hardy-dar. Slightly more widespread, especially here at the bottom, but still quite a sharp point. And still that shape of being able to maintain speed, but here we are going over to the lifestyle of gliding quite a bit. Crows will spread their wings and glide quite a bit, and that's what this part of the eagle's one is wide for. The eagle's wing is wide here to glide, but very pointed on the end to dive at speeds. Now going down to the bottom too, we've got a heron and a swan, which are more water-based. They don't spend nearly as much time flying, so quite a long, narrow wing. Definitely not that good at flying, and they make quite a lot of noise while they're doing it, because with a narrow wing you have to flap a lot harder to get any form of lift. A heron's slightly wider wing, but still a fairly similar shape. Not the best flyers, but because they're big they have to have a slightly wider wing than other animal or other birds of their size. Also make quite a lot of noise because they have to get a lot of lift to get their bodies up. Now let's have a look at the owl. The owl is a broad wing, and it's not just a broad wing, it's a broad feather. Now these will be completely different to all of the other bird species. Owls are unique in their wing shape. It is very broad all the way around, very rounded on the tip instead of having a very sharp point. And the reason for that is that their strategy is wholly different. They don't rely on speed. Owls rely on stealth and being quiet. So instead of making a fast approach, if they can just slowly glide their way in, they're really happy. Having a broader wing all round means that you don't need to flap your wings as much, so be very quiet. If you flap your wings a lot like a dove, it's so loud that it almost sounds like there's machinery next to you if it lands next to your head. So the first advantage an owl has is the broad wing. The second advantage that they have is that every single feather is completely different to the feathers of other birds. They have two very important adaptations, a third one kind of in the middle, but we'll talk about that. The one is this comb. So yesterday I was talking about the little filaments, so the individual little parts of a feather. Imagine if this was now a feather instead of a wing. On the leading edge, so the side that touches the wind first, the front end of the feather facing forwards, there's what we call a comb. It's these tiny little hair-like structures, and they're all kind of facing upwards like that, almost like eyelashes. And the purpose of them is they break the airflow that's coming straight over the wing that causes turbulence. The turbulence is what we hear. So by breaking that up, it splits it over the top and bottom of the wing with a bit more space. Then what happens is it hits the rest of the feathers, the rest of the surface, which is super soft and fluffy. So you saw the feathers of that owl, they looked so super soft. You just want to touch it and see how soft it is, like a pillow. All of the feathers are soft and velvety, and that absorbs sound. And whatever it can't absorb because of the fluffiness, it disperses it instead of it sliding very quickly straight over the wing. Then right at the bottom, at the trailing edge, the back end of the feather and the back end of the wing, the whole bottom of the wing, like the whole front of the wing is covered in the comb, the whole bottom is covered in what we call a fringe. It's basically where the feather trails off into these really light, wispy little pieces that hang off very loosely and softly at the back. That absorbs the last little bit of sound that the fluffiness and the velvetiness of the feathers couldn't, and whatever is left, it just pushes away. So where we would hear something like a pigeon flapping frantically, an owl doesn't have to flap because the wing is so wide, but at the same time the turbulence that is caused by air moving is completely broken up. So the sound doesn't have to be there. So it's very, very soft. And in fact, you'd probably need equipment to hear it. Stacey, isn't it cool what animals can do? I think it's absolutely amazing, all of these adaptations that the animals have, that if we look under a microscope, we can really fully see. Now, the last thing I want to show you is going to be an image, so bear with me, because I really want to show you what it looks like in real life. So I'm going to try and balance my phone. Oh, wait, let me get the pen. Let me try and balance my phone. I'm hoping you're going to be able to see it. There we go. So this is a comparison of an owl versus a pigeon. Can you see how hard a pigeon's feathers are? Everything tightly packed, tightly packed, very smooth edge. When you run your finger over it, it doesn't separate. Now this is the leading edge and this is the trailing edge. There's the leading edge with the comb on the tip of the owl's feathers and the trailing edge with the fringe. Look how the texture is completely different, soft, velvety, fluffy. You want to kind of run your fingers over it versus very rigid, very hard. Something that definitely looks a little bit more abrasive, and that's exactly what it is. It's either going to be abrasive or non-abrasive. It's either going to cause turbulence and cause air movement so fast that it makes a noise, or it's going to be soft and fluffy, diverting that turbulence away, absorbing it, and it just whispers and disappears. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Tigs, you're most welcome. I'm glad that you've learned a lot and that you're enjoying it. I've learned a lot too, and I've loved the diagram side. Last one to show you, this is a little image of how that air will move. So as the owl is moving forward, wind is coming towards it, and literally the feathers quite literally push the air above and around, below and around, cause a little bit of a turbulent spin at the end where all of that is absorbed, and it causes this wake at the back. And all that does is it, instead of colliding with the feathers, which would normally make the noise, it just slipstreams it straight behind, straight over, and absorbs all of that sound to make an owl fly silently. Isn't it wonderful? I love biology. It's so good. It's so good.